Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cover One Roundup here live on the Cover One YouTube channel each and every Monday night. It's a very special edition of the Cover One Roundup, if you will, because it's Dingus Day. Happy Dingus Day to all you who celebrate out there. I know that's a lot of you out there in Buffalo. David, how did you celebrate Dingus Day?
We're not exactly, surprisingly, not active celebrants of Dingus Day down here in Florida. I know that's actually surprising, just sort of given how the shape itself is shaped. But it's not really a thing down here, so.
You don't celebrate, what is it? Smigus Dingus? Is that what it is in Polish? Smigus Dingus. I believe that's what it is. Let's get Dingus Day chat. Let's get Dingus Day conversation going in chat. But yeah, whatever. What are we going to be doing today? Great question. We are going to be not kicking off our draft coverage because we've done a few draft episodes in the past, but or the last couple of weeks, but we are really diving into it today, if you will. We are going to be looking at each offensive position in the game of football and looking at one prospect a piece, so 2 total per position at each, again, offensive position, and identifying one prospect who we think could be a fit for the Bills in this year's draft. Now, there's a lot of things that go into that. Obviously, the Bills scheme, their need at a certain position, or like where they'll value it in relation to how early they will take that position, all of that stuff. So all of that factors into the prospects that we've chosen to talk about today, and we will talk about them in just a few moments. But before we do that, I have to introduce my co-host, David. How are you?
As I was saying right when we got on, I was doing fine until I lost my AirPods case at the gym. That's what I get for not wearing shorts that have pocket. I don't have pockets on these shorts, which is most likely what led to this more than anything else. I had my lock key and the spray bottle and towel right to make sure that was all with me, and then I had my AirPods case, and then at some point just left it somewhere. So that was great. I'm doing
Devastating. Yeah, as I said before we went live, that's God punishing you for being healthy and going to the gym and taking care of your body. He's God's like, nope, can't be doing that. Don't need that. No more gym. No more AirPod case either. Roy Collins writes, Dingus Day gift was re-signing Shaq Lawson, which we will get into momentarily.
That sounds about right, actually.
Right. It's nothing better than some good old Dingus and Shaq Lawson. That's very on brand. So we will talk about that momentarily. But before we do that, this show and Cover One in general are brought to you by BetUS, who we will hear about now via Greg, who's in Disney World.
Hey guys, Cover One is excited to announce our new partnership with BetUS. BetUS has a live wagering on all major games, the best betting variety in the business, and an easy deposit and withdrawal process with the fastest payouts in the industry. Our loyal Cover One fans get a choice between 2 exclusive offers, either a 125% sign-up bonus on your first deposit up to $2,500 or a free $50 bet with no deposit required. Just use promo code COVER1 on the links provided in the show description below. BetUS, where the game begins.
He wasn't in Disney World in that video, obviously.
We don't know that.
That could have been a live shot. That's actually every week that is a live shot. We cut live to Greg, who just has it down.
Just so a pure professional Greg just has it down like you would honestly think he's an AI, except he's not, because he's Greg and there's no AI that could possibly replicate what that man does. So.
Right. And we appreciate him for every week at roughly 7:04, 7:05 is when we get to him. Yeah. Just being here ready to give his 31-second hit, and then he's out, which again, we appreciate that. And speaking of doing well with the ad read every week, this show and Cover One in general are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. David, can you tell us a little bit about Underdog?
I don't love the expectations that you've set up for me, but I guess I'll give it a shot. Now, did anybody get to draft Josh Allen in your home league this past season? If you didn't, guess what? You could still use Underdog Fantasy's Pick'em contest. You can win money predicting if Josh Allen will go for the yard totals, his touchdowns, his completions. I'm about to sneeze. Hold on. Crap. Now I said it. Now I can't sneeze. Crap. All right, we're going to move on. All right. If you think Allen is going to blow up this week, you can put them both in your Pick'em. Predict up to 5 different over-unders correctly, and you can win 20 times your original money. Use promo code COVER1 when signing up to make your first deposit, and Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. That is 100 free US dollars in free play if you use promo code COVER1. That's the number 1. Sign up today and start winning today.
Thank you, Underdog, and BetUS, and Greg, and David, and everyone joining here today as we discuss, again, one offensive prospect at each position, one prospect at each offensive position that would be a fit for the Bills, which we will delve into here momentarily. But before we do that, it's time for the Roundup. This is the segment where we talk about the latest Buffalo Bills news, rumors, and all that other good stuff in a quick and roundup fashion. So we have a few matters of housekeeping here to get to before we can get into our draft stuff. A few things, one directly relating to the Buffalo Bills and the other indirectly relating to the Buffalo Bills, and we will cover them now. Number one, as we said earlier, as Roy Collins alluded to in his comment, the Buffalo Bills re-signed Shaq Lawson to a one-year deal, presumably the veteran minimum, because that's basically all Brandon Beane is handing out at this point, because he does not want to mess with that comp pick formula that will net him a third-round draft pick next year, presumably. You know, assuming everything goes as planned, he'll get a third-round pick next year. So Shaq Lawson back on a vet minimum. I like Shaq Lawson a lot. I like Shaq Lawson on a vet minimum deal a lot. I like what he brings to the defense and to the locker room. A very good locker room guy, a guy who's just
Pure vibes.
Pure vibes, electric in the locker room. Dudes love him. Dudes love to talk to him. He really does bring the energy. On the sideline, too, you saw what him and Jordan Phillips did, especially in their first time here, but last year as well to an extent, and also just on the field, right? You know what you're getting out of Shaq Lawson. Buffalo fans, at least by, year 3 or year 4 of his first stint here, they knew what they were getting out of Shaq Lawson, and they liked what they were getting out of Shaq Lawson. Then he goes to Miami, Houston, and New York, and they expect him to be something he's not, and they don't like him because, he's not this elite pass rusher. He comes back to Buffalo, and it's like, oh, yeah, you're very good run defender plus pass rusher. And he is that again, and now he's coming back, which, again, I don't know why other teams don't want Shaq Lawson, but I am fine with it.
It is odd, right? Where like he went to Miami, and I kind of thought that was an interesting fit just because of his size and the type of scheme that they were running with Flores. I was like, okay, maybe this will work. But if there's sort of like a floor there, right? Where I thought like that'll work, and then they were just like, nope, not gonna work. Goodbye. And then they shipped him off, and I think it was Houston that traded for him. I was like, okay, well, that also might work. And then Houston was like, nah, we don't really want you out there. And then the Jets took him, and he had like an interception, not even a sack, right? I think.
Something like that.
I know he had an interception at one point. But, he didn't stick with them either. And then the Bills were like, well, if you want to, you can come back with us. Because we haven't fixed our defensive line problem either. I'm gonna shout you out, Kyle, because on this very podcast during training camp, right before training camp ended, you made the prediction that Shaq Lawson was going to be edge 3 for this season, and I kind of scoffed at that.
Everyone did.
God, keep thinking I'm gonna sneeze it. It's not coming. Every time I think it's gonna happen, it just stops. Crap. Stupid. Is this going to be the whole freaking podcast just waiting for me to sneeze?
Maybe. Again, it's God punishing you. God is like, no gym anymore. No sneezing. No AirPod case. So yeah, no. Everyone, you're right. A lot of people did not like my Shaq Lawson as DE3 take. But
it turns out it was very right, whether we wanted it to be or not.
Well, and it's partially because I was at the time maybe overly pessimistic on AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham, but like my opinion on them
turned out to be correct again, much as we didn't want it to be.
Right. My opinion on them has not changed since then. They both are not very good. Whatever. Like, I like Shaq Lawson a lot. Again, like I said, I don't know why other teams don't like Shaq Lawson. Like you understand from his perspective why it took until April 10th for him to agree to come back to Buffalo on the vet minimum, because like you'd think some other team would pay him more than $1.7 million to do what Shaq Lawson does. Right? What he brings to the field, he gave the Bills, he played on 45% of their defensive snaps last year and was impactful. And again, what he brings to the locker room, I think that's more than a $1.7 million player, but apparently the NFL doesn't think so. And, the Buffalo Bills are better for it.
I agree.
Moving on. This one, I don't know if it stings really, but it's something that we have to talk about because the Buffalo Bills have been, I guess, linked to Odell Beckham for a long time, and it was for good reason because Von Miller was always talking about, he's coming here. Odell's coming here, which
I mean, they brought out the works during that little recruiting stint that Odell had during the season. I mean, they brought out Darian Bryan to try and get him here, and Odell was like, "All right, thanks for the free food." And he was just like,
blame him?
No, of course not. I did the same thing. Are you kidding me?
Anyone would, right? Like, yes.
And,
give me your
and really, here's what this signing with the Ravens. Odell Beckham signed with the Ravens, by the way. Anybody who doesn't know
that was the story.
That was the story. Here's what this boils down to. The Ravens gave him a 1-year, $18 million contract, $15 million guaranteed. What other team do you think even came close to that? The Jets, maybe?
Maybe.
I feel like Joe Douglas was like, we're already paying Alan Lazard more than we want to get Aaron Rodgers here. I don't think we want to pay $15 million guaranteed for. This is absurd. I'm sorry. This is just absurd. I don't understand this. You're paying someone who hasn't played since the Super Bowl in February of 2022. And he looked great. He really did. But he tore his ACL in that Super Bowl, didn't play at all this past year, and now you're giving him $15 million fully guaranteed? I really don't understand this. And you're doing this without an actual quarterback like on your roster. I mean, hold on. I'm sorry. Let me be clear. You still have Pro Bowl quarterback Tyler Huntley on your roster, so let's not forget that, of course. But I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, this is not this. I don't want people to read this as like, David doesn't think that they can afford Lamar Jackson now. This is not what that's about. It's more about why are you not paying Lamar Jackson? If you're going to bring in Todd Monken, an actual offensive coordinator that knows how to pass the ball, as opposed to Greg Roman, if you're going to bring in Odell Beckham Jr., why are you not signing Lamar Jackson? Why has this not happened yet? Because there's now NFL Network reporters and analysts who are like, oh, well, Lamar was in on this. He was recruiting Odell to Baltimore. It's like, that seems a little weird from someone who requested a trade from Baltimore like a month ago. So what's going on here? I can't make sense of this. I can't figure out what's the plan, what's the process, what's happening here. I don't get it.
No, it's all so messy. And again, even if, right, like the reports coming out now are, OBJ signed in Baltimore, fully expecting Lamar to be his quarterback. And it's like, okay, yes, let's assume this is the case. But even if, I guess the more, I don't want to say realistic or likely, but let's pretend that we're living in the reality where OBJ doesn't know, right? Where he's 50-50 on whether Lamar is going to be there or not. He's getting paid $18 million, 15 of which is guaranteed or whatever. Like you said, no one else was going to pay him that. No one was going to come close to that. So regardless of who his quarterback is, he's getting paid the most money, which the most money that he was going to get in this cycle, which again, good for him. And like, you're right. If you are going out and actively doing what Lamar has wanted you to do the entire time that he's been your quarterback, and that's bringing in like actual receiver talent, right? Not just throws at the dartboard, so to speak, like a Rashad Bateman.
Not the world, like actual wide receivers, right? And here's the other thing, right? That NFLPA list that got put out of like ranking the qualities of like NFL facilities and coaching staff and or training staff or all the like amenities sort of stuff. The Ravens were finally. All right, now that's over with.
This is the only podcast in the world that one not only would not mute for a sneeze, but to build up the sneeze as though it is a WrestleMania main event, and we just build up to it and allude to the sneeze coming, and then it does, and it hits, and the crowd goes wild for the sneeze.
Third time's the charm, right?
Rule of threes, yes. Like in journalism. All right.
Why do I get paid to do this shit? Anyway, so... What was that? All right. So Baltimore just apparently ranked very, very low in terms of strength and conditioning. So, for someone, stop laughing! I can't do this, man.
Oh God.
Oh my gosh. All right. So Baltimore, anyway, you suck with your strength and training, and a 30-year-old receiver coming off an ACL tear is probably not a great combination for that. That's all. That's it. That's all I'm saying.
And yes. I would have, I think we made it clear on this podcast in months past, like, yeah, we like OBJ. We would have been cool with OBJ in Buffalo, but like not at $18 million, and not in the $15 to $18 million range. Like, yeah, I was cool for a flyer, right? Like 1 year, $6 to $8 million. Cool. Which who even knows if that's what, given Bean's recent track record, maybe he was just like, you know what, it's gonna be 1.7. Like,
I mean, honestly, it probably was. He was probably like, listen, we will offer you this much money because we're looking at that comp pick next year. Take it or leave it.
Which, hey, we'll see. We'll see if OBJ gets to play with Lamar Jackson, but until then, we'll just have to wait and see. I did see the idea of like the Ravens trading Lamar for the 4th overall pick to the Colts, and then the Ravens pick Anthony Richardson, and it's Anthony Richardson and OBJ, which is fun. But like, okay, I just ranted about this yesterday, really just to the void to anyone who would listen, but just like, which is kind of what this podcast is. But
yeah,
right. Like, the NFL is so stupid because if the Colts actually do want Lamar Jackson, like Lamar Jackson is still going to presumably be a free agent after the draft. So why would they trade the 4th overall pick when they could just wait until the day after the draft, give him what he wants, and then give up your next 2 first-round picks, which will likely be, late teens to anyone in the 20s.
Same thing with Atlanta, right? Where it's like Atlanta has said vociferously they are not interested in Lamar Jackson. Oh, he's too injured. Oh, we didn't want to do this, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, this is the team that was like this close to closing the deal for the Nasty Man last year. So, I'm kind of waiting for Atlanta to be like, yeah, we'll totally trade 2 first-round picks, just not 2023's first-round pick. Because we need yet we need to spend another big pick on a skill player that we're not going to use, right?
Mm-hmm. So right. I don't know. I also love the people who are dying for the shield and are like, people really think there's collusion here against Lamar Jackson. That's stupid. And it's like, well, it's not the stupidest thing in the world if you think about it critically. It's absolutely not the
stupidest thing in
right.
the world.
If you think about it critically for half a second, no, I could absolutely see a group of billionaires doing this. Like, whatever.
It's like, hey, by the way, you remember last year when these morons decided to give the Nasty Man $250 million. They're like, yeah,
Guaranteed.
hey, we're not doing that. So if you could not do that too, that would be great. All right, cool. We won't do that.
Wonderful. Okay, but yes, so now Baltimore is like, okay, we're not going to give you what you want, Lamar, even though that it's probably completely fair given what happened last offseason, and what you're asking for isn't out of the question. Just we're not going to do it, so we got you a wide receiver now. So we did what you wanted us to do the whole time.
That's right.
So please come back. Please forgive us. I love the NFL. I love football.
Such a weird exploration into toxic relationships, right? Where it's just like, no, it's like, listen, we've been in this relationship for a long time. I want a ring. And they're like, well, I don't know if I can really afford a ring. I don't know if we can really, why do we really need a ring, right? What our love is what matters, babe. That's not, we don't need to be married. We don't need a piece of paper to tell us that we love each other. And it's like, well, but yeah, it's very weird. It's very, very weird. I don't get what's happening in Baltimore.
Billionaires colluding? What's next? Hey, Succession was on last night.
Do you watch Succession?
No, but
I don't either.
People were talking about Succession.
People were talking about Game of Thrones when that was on too. I didn't watch that either. So
me neither. I did watch House of the Dragon though. Which
this is why we're co-hosts.
Did you watch House of the Dragon?
Absolutely not.
Oh. Well, I was going to say, we're not talking about the Bills anymore. We're talking about... To be fair, though, we really haven't talked about the Bills all episode, which we will do right now, tangentially. We are now moving into the meat and potatoes of the podcast, if you will. Again, we will be looking at each offensive position and identifying one prospect each that could be a fit for the Buffalo Bills in the draft. So I think I've alluded to what the topic is enough. So let's just get started here. We're going to get started with quarterback, which, look, let's not spend a lot of time on quarterback. As you've written here in the outline, David, I legitimately could not, or I do not care less, or I couldn't care less, which very true, right? The Buffalo Bills are not a team who is going to take a quarterback high in this draft. If they do take a quarterback, it will likely be on day 3. Probably the 6th or the 7th round, or maybe it's a priority undrafted free agent. But again, if a quarterback goes undrafted, why on earth would they sign with the Buffalo Bills? Why would they look at this quarterback scenario and be like, yes, that's the one I'm going to choose to join? So,
hey, the Bills got Mitch Trubisky paid by Pittsburgh. So,
hey,
just saying,
right? Well, I don't know if Ken Dorsey is going to have the same level of name value as Brian Dable to attach, but regardless, yes. So if the Bills do want to get a quarterback, I guess of some value or of some name value even in this draft, they'll likely have to select him, but it won't be until 5th, 6th, preferably 7th round. So I was looking earlier, the last couple of days, just researching for this episode, looking for dudes to talk about at the quarterback position. Wanted to talk about Tyson Bagent, Shepherd quarterback.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
D2, totally. Senior Bowl. I don't want to say standout, but the issue with Tyson Bagent is that he is about as boring as I guess the profile of Tyson Bagent, Shepherd Rams quarterback, would suggest that he is. Weird throwing motion, weird prospect, and Backbone writes, Bills don't have a 7th round pick this year. Well, when they trade down 6 times, like all the mock drafts suggest that they do, and they get all of these draft picks. But yes, thank you, Backbone, for that. But also, again, we'll see ultimately where they pick in the draft, given after the moves they make. But still, even a 6th round quarterback, whatever. So I was going to do Tyson Bagent, but then I started thinking about what Tyson Bagent, not a great athlete, again, as you would expect, but just I was starting to think about the idea, the concept of a backup quarterback conceptually? What do I want out of a backup quarterback? Do I want someone who can come in and keep an offense in rhythm, keep an offense moving, a Case Keenum type, if you will, like not an overly dynamic player, but just someone who I can trust to come in and make reads, make quick throws, all of that stuff? Or do I want an agent of chaos as my backup quarterback? Do I want someone with a bit of athleticism, with a bit of playmaking ability, who can go out there and make a few crazy plays? I don't know in practice what I want. In theory, I think I would like an agent of chaos, and they're a hell of a lot more fun to talk about. So I was going to, again, do Max Duggan, which, Max Duggan, fun player to an extent. He's something. Also looked at Stetson Bennett a little bit, but I don't really feel like talking about Stetson Bennett because I feel like if you've watched college football at all in the last 10 years, you follow the 10-year career arc of Stetson Bennett. He will be 26.
Chalamet?
Right. No, well, you're right. You're not wrong.
I
remember
know, we've already had this debate.
Right. Yes. I think you tweeted it, and I was drunk at a bar, and I went into your DMs. I was like, "What are you talking about?" Stetson Bennett looks like Timothy Chalamet, and then I was like, "You know what? Not wrong."
If Timothy Chalamet played football, he looks like Stetson Bennett. That's all I'm saying.
So in the movie, okay. So what's going to happen is the Bills are going to take Stetson Bennett. Josh Allen's going to get hurt. Stetson Bennett comes in and leads the Bills to the Super Bowl, much as he did Georgia to the national championship. And then we have Timothy Chalamet, being the star of the Buffalo Bills movie that's going to be filmed in Cleveland. Draft day reference. Okay. But no, I landed on Dorian Thompson-Robinson, quarterback out of UCLA. Talk about an agent of chaos. Fun player. Very fun player to watch, just not all that polished, right? DTR, I think everyone knows. Everyone's heard of DTR. You've seen some of the stat lines that DTR put up in college. Fun player, again, but like you watch him and you can see why he's getting this day 3 buzz, right? Like, or undrafted, but like more likely day 3 prospect. Undersized. He's 6'1" in the 203 to 206 range. Again, undersized quarterback, completed 63.3% of his passes throughout his 5 years at UCLA, 88 touchdowns to 36 interceptions, I think I wrote there. Also rushed for over 1,800 yards and 28 touchdowns. So again, mobile, as you can see there, as you can hear, athlete, very good athlete. Ball looks good coming out of his hands, but again, I think that 63% completion percentage might be a little bit, I guess, misleading, if you will. Not the most accurate thrower of the football. Ball placement is not consistent, not all that great. But again, it's about agent of chaos, if you will. Like I said, it's about the idea of a quarterback nightmare scenario where Josh Allen and now Kyle Allen go down. And for some reason, you need to put Dorian Thompson in a game at some point in the next 2 or 3 years. Just a guy who can come in there, push it deep, or occasionally has the ability to do so, right? He has decent arm strength, but more so just the ability to make something happen with his legs, and just make something happen when the play breaks down, which, like I said, he has the ability to do. And like, just super fun to watch. Like I said, elusive in the open field when he's able to get into the open field. Watched numerous highlights of him hurdling dudes, which, like, cool. The Bills like quarterbacks who can hurdle guys, but like, it's more fun to watch a 6'5", 240-pound man hurdle linebackers than it is to watch a 6'1", 200-pound man, just in terms of, like, I don't think Josh Allen's going to get broken in half. Whereas, like, you watch Dorian Thompson fly through the air and it's like, oh boy, like, I hope you come down in one piece. But I don't know if I want the Bills to draft a quarterback. Like, I think this team has, like, Brandon Beane claims to not draft for need, and I certainly hope he's not drafting for need in round 6 or round 5. But, like, still, I think the Bills could use talent at a number of other positions. So I don't necessarily want them to invest in a quarterback, but I think if they are to invest in one, I would like a Dorian Thompson-Robinson just as a guy who you can develop along for 2 or 3 years into that backup quarterback mold, and then he can stick around and, again, just be a reliable backup. I think that's his ceiling. I don't think he'll ever be a starter, but again, a backup quarterback with some mobility, playmaking ability, I think that is what he's going to be. And it'd be fun if it were in Buffalo. So, David, I don't think you have a quarterback to bring up here, but what do you think about DTR?
Say ditto, and let's move on.
Okay, fair. So I will throw it to you here with the running back position because I just gave my sermon on Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So I'll let you pick it up here with his college teammate at the running back position.
So I am looking at, and if you've followed my Twitter, at DFAUXY, by the way, at DFoxy, you have probably seen me post a very short clip from the NBC, now Fox comedy show called Brooklyn Nine-Nine, in which bring me a Charbonnet. Zach Charbonnet is who I'm interested in.
Okay.
And now, Bills fans may or may not remember, to their own, detriment or not, Zach Moss and his career here. I want you to imagine Zach Moss, but like better and not like a plotter and just like a little bit faster. That's basically what Zach Charbonnet is.
Sounds good in theory.
Like it sounds good in theory. And I'm sure other NFL teams are looking at that as like, oh, that sure would be nice to have when we can't get Bijan Robinson. I really like Zach Charbonnet. I feel like the Bills should take a running back at some point in this draft, because outside of James Cook, you don't have anyone outside of 2023 on this roster.
Nyheim Hines is under contract.
I don't think. Right.
But is he going to be
Damian Harris is on a 1-year deal. Mm-hmm. So what does this look like outside? So I think that someone like Charbonnet is probably going to be too high for them. I think he'll probably be a day 2 guy, like probably round 3, maybe even round 2 if there's a run on running backs.
Like where Zach Moss was taken.
Kind of, yeah. So I don't know if that's necessarily where the Bills want to spend that pick, even though they've done it several times now. But I do think that if they did take Zach Charbonnet in the 3rd round, I'd be fine with it, assuming that, I actually like the other 2 picks that they make before that, which is not a guarantee, obviously.
Sure.
But a lot of it really does just sort of depend on how, really just the nature of the draft. It's just like finding a guy that you feel is worth that value at that spot, right? You don't want to reach just because of need, like we talked about. You don't want to blindly just take, oh, this is the best player available, and it's like a quarterback, even though you have Josh Allen. It's like that doesn't make sense, obviously. But what you want is somebody that you feel like is going to contribute to your team either now or somebody that can replace somebody later that you then don't have to pay a big contract to, or even a moderate contract to. You can just plug in this rookie who's on a very controlled contract. And for me, I really like Zach Charbonnet a lot. Other guys that could probably fit in that style or mold, even though they're obviously not the same. Sean Tucker from Syracuse.
Yeah.
We've Sean Tucker fans on this podcast, not necessarily because of his football play, but because of his personality, which is not a bad thing.
I would be pleased.
Yeah. and who is this guy from Illinois? Brown, I want to say. Some running back from.
Yes. He's a twin, correct?
Yes. Running back from
Chase?
Illinois. This is great.
I think it's Chase.
Yes, it is Chase Brown. Good for you. Chase Brown. Chase Brown was at the Senior Bowl, and he looks like a running back. Like, he looks like he was, like, made to be a running back, right? Like, everything, like, he's just built super well. He, like, moves super well. Like, everything just sort of looks good. But, man, he's got those fumble problems, and they showed up majorly during the Senior Bowl week. It was unpleasant because he had a real chance to, like, really separate himself from the pack, and those fumbles and drops and bad pass protection, it was just like, I'm really trying to like you, guy, but you're making it really difficult.
You're making it hard to like you. It's a very nice thing to say to someone.
That's right. It's probably what the Ravens said to Lamar, right?
Yeah. And vice versa. Lamar said back.
Yeah. So those are the types of players. If the Bills go the running back route, that's sort of who I'm looking for, right? Somebody with solid vision who can run in between the tackles effectively, grind out those tough yards, kind of like a Damian Harris, but a little bit more complete. Like, we like Damian Harris, but he's a very one-dimensional back. He's very straightforward, gonna just pick up those, grind it out, tough yards, but that's only gonna take you so far in the NFL, and I think especially on a 1-year deal, the Bills are looking at that like, this is fine for right now because we just need somebody that we trust in this position, but we need something else in the future. So it would not surprise me if they take a running back. I'd be a little surprised if they took one on day 2. But again, that just depends on how the board falls.
Very true. See, I am not, I guess, overly fond of the idea of taking a running back on day 2, regardless of, like, see, you bring up a good point about, like, the player, right? It's just like, if it's a good player and you have to get him on in round 3, then so be it. But, like, I'll get into my player here in a second, but Connor C with the spin zone of the century. Is it true that the Bills completely fell apart after they traded Moss? What a spin zone. Yes, the Bills fell apart in the second half of the season because they traded Zach Moss. I love it. The locker room just collapsed with Zemo gone.
Just couldn't handle it anymore.
They were like, no, right? Like, I don't know what I'm going to. Every player was like, now that the option of one day being on the Zemo podcast has been eliminated for me, I don't know what to do. Truck Reviewer writes, I like Roschon Johnson, Mohamed Ibrahim, and Hunter Lupke. Roschon Johnson, yes, Mohamed Ibrahim to an extent. So we all have the same, like, type, I guess, of player that we're targeting here in chat, and you and I. Roy Collins writes, day 3 or UDFA-RB is fine. So yes, that Roy Collins there framed it well for me. I like the Bills' current crop of running backs. I like James Cook a whole hell of a lot. I think that he is going to be even better now that he's changed his number to number 4.
I agree with that.
James Cook is going to look so fast out there on the field. He's going to look like a different player, and I like the player that we saw last year. But, like, joking aside, yes, I really like what we saw from James Cook last season, especially towards the end of the year. I really think we were seeing James Cook finally adjust to the NFL. Those rookie mistakes became few and far between, and he was looking very good by the end of the season, looking like the player that we thought James Cook was going to be. And I think he's only going to take a further step forward as we enter next season, which, great. You complement that with Damian Harris, who, again, is a complementary piece in terms of play style to James Cook, and then Nyheim Hines, who I think could have an offensive role. I guess comparatively any offensive role will be an offensive role against what he had last season after getting traded here. But still, I do think that Nyheim Hines can have a role for this team. So, like, that's 3 backs right there that I think could have roles offensively in Cook, Harris, and Hines. So whatever running back they do take, assuming they do take a running back at some point in this draft, I don't know how they get on the field, right? Like even if they do take a guy to be a long-term usurper of Damian Harris, if you will, right? Like a dude to plug in after Harris leaves in 2024, you still have Harris in 2023, and I don't think the rookie is getting on the field over him. I don't think the rookie is getting on the field over James Cook. And what Hines brings to special teams, I don't know if a rookie's getting on the field over Hines. So that's why I'm hesitant to the idea of drafting a running back on day 2 or even in like round 4 or round 5. So that's why I bring up Cameron Peoples out of Appalachian State. I watched I guess a shocking amount of Appalachian State football this year, if you will. I love the Fun Belt, right? I am the average college football
always
consumer.
pro Fun Belt.
Right. Like any good college football fan is a supporter of the Fun Belt. And Appalachian State were probably the best team coming out of the Fun Belt last year. And Cameron Peoples, every time I watched Appalachian State, I think especially against Texas A&M when they upset them, Cameron Peoples was – it might not have been the TAMU game, but there was some game that I watched this year for the Mountaineers where Cameron Peoples was just insane. And he, of course, is their running back, projected as a late pick, if not priority UDFA. And you just look at him, and again, he's that not the like exact same type of player, but same potential role, same function as like a Zach Charbonnet or a Roschon Johnson, right? He is a north-south runner, just short yardage, deep red zone, goal line type of player, or like, 3rd and 1, just put him in and he'll bulldoze guys over. 6'1", 217, like I said, power back. He really only played in his last 3 seasons at Appalachian State and had 31 touchdowns in those last 3 seasons. So good for him, right? He has a nose for the end zone, and given his 6'1", 217-pound frame, you would expect him to be able to, bulldoze guys, get the ball in the end zone when they're near the end zone. And that's exactly what he does. Not a dynamic athlete by any means, right? Like not really his game, but he is, I think, given what I think his prospective role is here, I think that he's a guy who the Bills could develop along for, again, I don't even want them to draft him, I guess. Like, that's how little I want the Bills to draft a running back. I just want them to sign Cameron Peoples as a UDFA, preferably keep him on the practice squad, right? Develop him along for a year, and then I'm confident that, going into the year after that, you can have a Cook, Peoples, and, whoever else. We'll probably fall in love with some other running back to draft next year because that's what happens all the time. But regardless, the only thing kind of holding Cameron Peoples back is there are numerous things holding Cameron Peoples back. I mean, he's a projected UDFA or 7th round draft pick, but again, his athleticism isn't great. Really no production as a receiver in college, and really didn't play special teams all that much either. So like those are things, especially for a bottom of the roster running back. If you're just north-south runner and you don't really offer anything in the passing game or on special teams, you're probably not going to stick around all that long. But I think given Cameron Peoples' ability as a north-south runner, I do think that is strong enough that given what the Bills would need out of that role, I think Cameron Peoples could fill that. And like, as again, I want to bring up the comment from the Trek reviewer again, Roschon Johnson, I guess, round 4. Like if Roschon Johnson is there, the Texas running back who obviously was a compliment to Bijan this year, if they can get him in round 4, I would be okay with that. That's about as early as I would be happy with a running back selection, just because, again, I like the player. I like the power that he brings. I like his long-term fit potentially, and he's a good special teamer. He might have even been a captain for the Longhorns, but even if he wasn't, just like that type of leader, special teamer, what he could bring to this team, not even to the offense, just to the team to begin before eventually taking that, complementary role offensively. I would be cool with that for a Roschon Johnson. But again, I don't even necessarily know if I want to take a running back in round 4. So that's why Cameron Peoples is kind of the guy who I'm looking at.
Yeah. A lot of it's just really going to depend on how the board falls to the Bills.
Mm-hmm.
But to me personally, like, as much as I would like to have somebody else other than James Cook on, not as a slight to James Cook, obviously. I like James Cook and I'm excited to see what he can do. But he is somebody that I think needs a very clear complement, and there's not going to be one on this roster beyond this year. So I think I just for my own, sake of looking towards the future, I'd rather have some on the roster now, but I wouldn't exactly call it a priority either. So there you go.
Good running back talk. And again, the more Fun Belt representation on this roster, the better, is what it comes down to at the end of the day. Which the Fun Belt's going to be less fun now that Jamie Chadwell's gone. Now that that offense in Coastal Carolina, look, that offense was fun. Don't get me wrong. 70% of it was the play design and the scheming and all that.
Yes.
30% of it was that it was being displayed on a teal field in teal uniforms. That was a lot of the appeal for me. Now that that's at Liberty, that offense, like it's still fun. It's just less fun now that they're not in teal uniforms and they don't have giant cocks on their helmets. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Kyle. I know exactly what you mean.
I love the Chanticleers, man. The Fun Belt is something else. And speaking of, I don't know where I'm going with that segue. We're going to move to the wide receiver position. I'll kick off here. I have made my desire long known that I want the Buffalo Bills to draft a wide receiver early in this draft, day 2 at the latest. I want Sean McDermott. I want Brandon Beane to finally invest some significant draft capital into a wide receiver. Now you can say, Kyle, he did that when he traded for Stephon Diggs. He invested a first-round pick. You're right, but I want him to actually select a player with a first-round pick or a second-round pick, select a wide receiver, and actually develop a young receiver along in this offense, right? Like, hopefully that is something that they do early. And one of my favorite this year, one of my favorite things about the wide receiver position is just that dudes can win in so many different ways, right? Like there are so many different types of athletes and types of people who can succeed at the wide receiver position, right? Like some dudes just win because they're bigger than everyone else. Some dudes just win because they're faster than everyone else. All, just I don't need to explain to you the wide receiver position. You're watching a football podcast. But my personal preference and my favorite types of receivers to watch are the route runners, right? Are the dudes who are just twitchy off the line, quick off the line, and shifty. Your Stephon Diggs or your Calvin Ridleys, right? Like those are the types that I really love. And I have the most fun watching them. I love what they can bring to this offense potentially, and especially seeing what Stephon Diggs has accomplished with Josh Allen and seeing that Josh Allen can very much succeed with those types of receivers. That's why I guess when I'm looking at receivers, that's kind of who I value more so than other guys. So that's why I have landed on Jordan Addison to talk about here today in this podcast. Very realistic possibility that Jordan Addison is not on the clock when the Bills go on the clock at pick 27 in the draft. Could go earlier, but again, have seen him fall a little bit in recent weeks. Kind of as the draft has neared here, because there are very legitimate concerns over his size, measured in at the combine at 5'11", 173 pounds, and then lost 3 pounds between the combine and his pro day, measured in at 5'11", 170. So not great, right? Like that's very legitimate. If you are looking at this 5'11", 170-pound wide receiver and being like, I don't know if that's going to play in the NFL. I don't know if that's going to hold up, especially not on the boundary. Fair concerns. But I do want to give a couple of prefaces here before we further delve into it. This is a generally smaller receiver class. I think many people have talked about that, but just in general, receivers are quite small this year, whether it's Jalen Hyatt, Zay Flowers, Tyler Scott, Nathaniel Dell, Josh Downs. receivers are smaller this year. There are very few, like there's a Quentin Johnston, of course, and Jackson Smith and Jigba isn't small, but like very few dudes who are like, you don't have your, in general, you don't have your top of the line prospects, and you don't have your top of the line prospects that are just bigger than everyone else. It's just smaller dudes. And also Jordan Addison, like he's, as I said earlier about receivers being able to win in different types of ways, Jordan Addison isn't the type of player who like where size is an attribute, if you will. It's not like he just outmuscles dudes and he goes up over dudes' heads and just outstrengths them and pulls the ball away. That's not like his game, right? He just makes you miss off the line. And he also, like, we'll get into his actual game here. Like, he creates separation with route running, which, like, I guess, right, like I'd still like him to be more than 170 pounds, but like,
right.
And that's another thing is, I only say this half jokingly, like he's not going to have an issue putting on weight in Buffalo, New York, right? Like put him through a Buffalo winter or take him on a wing tour. You'll get him up to 180 right quick. But just like, again, half joking, but the Bills in the past have not been averse to the idea of drafting players and asking them to put on weight or lose weight. AJ Epinesa. Like, again, if the Bills want him to put on weight, Jordan Addison will put on weight. But regardless, that's looking past the size concerns. So, like, let's just, again, look into what he is as a player. Like I said, one of, if not the best route runner in this year's draft. Just so technically refined as a route runner, really great footwork, great feet, and just like watching him cut, just like so aggressive in and out of his cuts. You watch his little head movements and stuff, just very fun route runner to watch. Quick and shifty off the line, gets upfield quickly, gets to top speed quickly. And again, like, he creates separation with his route running. And again, just with his cuts, he's able to create that much separation when he cuts. But just that isn't to say that he's not fast, right? And I think he ran like a 4.49 40, but like he is quick, right? Like you could put him on a go route if you want to, and he could just run past the guy. But again, that would kind of be taking away from what he's able to do as a route runner.
Yeah.
So like there's just so much that Jordan Addison can bring to a team. And again, he has inside outside versatility, did play in the slot, more so played on the boundary at USC. But again, he does have that inside outside versatility. So he can just come in here. I would like I guess long term, I've seen a lot of people, I've watched a lot of videos, breakdowns, read a lot of reports and stuff on him, and also just watched film in general. But just like, I guess maybe Jordan Addison would best succeed in the slot, but I would like to throw him on the boundary, right? I think that's what I would like the Bills to do, is long term a boundary receiver, and then. But again, even this year, right? Like if you can get him in, you pick him at 27, you put him in the offense, you have Diggs, Davis on the boundary, and then Addison in the slot. And then sometimes you can change it up with, like you put Deontay Hardy in there, kind of change it around a little bit. Maybe throw Davis in the slot, big slot a little bit. And then you have Addison on the outside. There's just so much versatility that a guy like Jordan Addison offers you this year before long term. Again, I think Jordan Addison is going to be an elite wide receiver in the NFL. Like, that is my bold take, is I think Jordan Addison will probably end up being the best receiver out of this class. Smith and Jig was close, but I think Jordan Addison is going to be the best one ultimately. And I really hope that he's able to accomplish this with the Bills. And I think that's kind of, again, my sermon on Jordan Addison. They might have to trade up to get him. Like, we were talking about this in the Cover One chat yesterday, because there was a report that we'll allude to later in True or Rubbish about the Bills maybe being okay with trading up. And it's like, I cannot imagine what some of the fan base is going to do if the Bills trade up for a 5'11", 170-pound receiver. I would be over the moon. I'd be like, wonderful. That's exactly what I wanted. This is exactly what I've been waiting for, to quote Stephen A. Smith.
Yeah, I like Jordan Addison a lot. I feel like he is, like you said, along with Jackson Smith and Jigba, kind of like those types of guys where in spite of Addison's size, I think that he's going to be a really good player. This, like you said, this wide receiver class is very odd. We've had a lot of good wide receiver classes in the last couple of years. This really just isn't one of them. It's not like it's bad, but it's very limited, largely because of size. It's just a very odd, like, combination of players where none of them are really all that big or tall, or even the one that Quentin Johnson, obviously very tall, but and built well, but not exactly a burner either, and didn't come from a super nuanced offense. So you feel pretty like, if you're going to be a height, weight, speed guy, then you better be pretty fast. And he only ran like a 4.5, which, like, okay, right. but like if you were that size and 4.5 40, that would be fine if you knew how to run routes, but you don't. So like, we're gonna move on from that. Now I think that there's probably a couple of receivers that I think would really qualify as like legit first round types of receivers. Jordan Addison, I think, is one. Jackson Smith and Jigba is another. I think Zay Flowers is another.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone outside of those three is kind of like, we're probably going to look to try to do that, right? Now, let's say that one of those receivers that gets taken on early day 2, like a Josh Downs, let's say, who we all very much like in the Cover One chat, well, then who do you have to turn to? There's not really a lot of guys that fit into that, like, third round kind of slot or third round position, let's say. There is one in my mind, and I think that's Jayden Reed from Michigan State. Jayden Reed was really good during the Senior Bowl week. Proved to be much faster than I think people were anticipating. He's got really sharp route running skills. They didn't ask him to run a ton of different types of routes at Michigan State. If you watch that offense, it's very, very weird what they ask him to do, because he's like 5'10", 190, I think, maybe something like that. And they throw him a lot of fades, back shoulders, and jump balls. Just very, very weird. And even weirder, up with a lot of them. Like, he really fights for those contested catches, along with being a pretty sharp route runner. It's a very unique combination. And if we're talking about somebody who has that sort of inside-out type of flexibility, this is somebody that I think could really benefit from being a slot receiver in the NFL, but also you can put him on the outside and he can win a couple of those battles, like enough of those battles on a per game basis to where you're like, you have to be able to account for him on the outside if he moves there or motions there, right? You can't just sort of leave him alone and be okay with that. I think that Jayden Reed is a very unique player. And in addition, he's a pretty good punt returner too. And while you certainly have guys like Nyheim Hines and Deontay Harty to fill those sorts of roles, having someone like Jayden Reed certainly doesn't help or doesn't hurt either, right? I mean, so I think that this is somebody where if you don't get that value that you want or feel comfortable in the position that you are in those first 2 rounds, Jayden Reed is somebody that I think could be available in round 3 that could really help this offense just sort of round out that receiver room, because you have Stephon Diggs, you have Gabe Davis, and, obviously there's a lot of split opinions on Gabe Davis, but that's neither here nor there right now. He's on the roster and he's a good player. Not a great player, but a good player. You bring in Deontay Harty, who realistically, and I think even Brandon Beane said this, like, we're looking at him as wide receiver 4, right? Like, he's not coming in to be the slot guy. He's not coming in to be the Cole Beasley type, even though he kind of is. But you ideally want him to have that same sort of per snap efficiency that he's had in New Orleans, that you want him to have that in Buffalo. And having someone else come in to be the wide receiver 3, someone like a Jaden Reed or a Josh Downs or a Zay Flowers, that's the sort of that's where you can really feel comfortable in this wide receiver room, I think. So
Yeah, no, I like Jaden Reed quite a bit. I like the idea of him just, and like I've watched some, but most of my knowledge is from you kind of showing Jaden Reed a lot of love on this podcast over the last couple of months. But no, like the type of player that you describe and the type of player that, you watch, it makes sense, right? He could be a fit. I like what he brings. Just again, it just kind of goes back to what I've been saying all offseason is I want Bean to invest significantly into the wide receiver position. I would like the Bills to draft a receiver in round 1 or round 2. But like you said, if it all comes down to value, it all comes down to how the draft, pans out. And like if Addison and Njigba and Flowers are off the board at 27, I don't want the Bills to draft a Jalen Hyatt just for the sake of drafting a receiver. Or like I don't want the Bills to draft a Josh Downs. I love Josh Downs. I don't know if he's good enough to take at 27. Like I don't want them to just take a receiver who doesn't match value just for the sake of taking one. Same in round 2, right? Like I don't want the Bills to take Nathaniel Dell for the sake of taking a receiver in round 2. Like that's not what I want them to do. So like if the draft falls in such a way that the value doesn't match up at 27 or when they pick in the second round, Jaden Reed would be more than a serviceable consolation prize for me. Like I'm fine I'm fine with Jaden Reed being the receiver they leave this draft from if it's clear that that was kind of just how it panned out. If they are passing on the likes of Jordan Addison and Zay Flowers and Josh Downs, if he's available in round 2, and they end up with Jaden Reed because they took other players over these better receivers, I'd be like, yeah, not bad, but you could have probably done better.
Sure.
Like, especially considering who they take instead of the likes of Addison, Flowers, and whoever. But just reiterate, not the end of the world if that's the receiver who they come away with. Are there any other receivers that we want to talk about? Like mostly for me, I've just been focusing on the top guys because I've made it clear that's what I want, right?
That's what we all want. We all want the shiny new toy.
Right. Like I like Njigba. Like I like Jackson Smith and Njigba reportedly in Buffalo on a visit today, which really cool. I'd be awesome. They'd have to trade up to get Jackson Smith and Njigba, but like
maybe they do, maybe they don't.
If they don't, then yes. Like if they get one of Jackson Smith and Njigba or Jordan Addison, it's an A+ draft, especially if they don't have to trade up for him. Even if they do have to trade up, cool. Roy Collins writes, Mims 3rd round, maybe. I don't hate Marvin Mims. I do not hate Marvin Mims. I'm a Oklahoma enjoyer, if you will. I'm an enjoyer of Oklahoma football. I like Marvin Mims quite a bit. Don't necessarily know what he offers the Bills per se, but don't hate the player. I do not hate the player by any means. A.T. Perry also is a fun name. He's from Wake Forest, correct?
Yes. The AT stand for all-terrain, like all-terrain Perry.
Yes, you're right. Correct. Again, big dude, one of the bigger receivers in this draft. Don't know if that's what the Bills need, but again, would not necessarily hate A.T. Perry if the value is correct. Okay, moving on to tight end, a position that we're an hour deep. Jesus, an interesting position group for the Buffalo Bills this season in this draft, because like I've seen some people bring up the idea of potentially taking a tight end in round 1. Don't love the idea. We'll get into that later in True or Rubbish. We'll get into that in True or Rubbish. But like there are a few good tight ends in this year's class. Not a like a good, I guess. There are a few tight ends whose value, I guess, technically speaking, would match up late first round. But I am not focusing on one of those guys here today. I am instead focusing on Luke Schoonmaker, tight end out of Michigan. Late day 2, early day 3 projection. And again, that about adds up with where I would want the Bills, or where the earliest I would be comfortable, so to speak, with the Bills taking a tight end. You look at Luke Schoonmaker. Greg Vorse loves him. Greg Vorse, big fan of Luke Schoonmaker. He's written about him for the Cover One website. Good size, 6'5", 251
Shoemaker
pounds.
or Spoonmaker?
Schoonmaker. There's an
That's
N.
I don't like. No. Shoon or Schoon?
Is it Schoon? Could be.
I don't
Schoon.
know. I'm asking you.
There's an H. It's Schoon maker.
Right.
And they call him Schoon or Shoon. If we can get some, a language breakdown in the chat. Regardless, I'll call him Luke. I'll call him Luke until we have confirmation on how his name is pronounced. Good athlete, 9.86 RAS, relative athletic score. That's what that stands for. Doesn't have a ton of collegiate production. Didn't play much until his final season at Michigan, but is pronounced Schoonmaker. Awesome stuff. Again, you can tell I've only read it. I've only read it in writing. But doesn't have a ton of college production, but is a well-rounded prospect. It shows promise as a receiver, right? Shows or has shown that he can be effective in the short to intermediate game. But again, not like a world beater in terms of being a route runner, but he's solid. Not a world beater as a receiver, but he's solid. And he's also a solid tight end, right? When he was asked to block, or tight end, he's a solid blocker, more so against the pass, or more so against the run. But again, like when they asked him to be a blocker, Luke Schoonmaker, there we go, answered the call, right? He was a fine to solid blocker. And he projects as a tight end 2, probably. Like, that's probably his ceiling in the NFL. I don't know if he's ever going to be your world beater tight end 1. That's really not his profile, really not the type of player that he projects to be. But the Bills luckily already have a tight end on their roster who they have signed to an extension in Dawson Knox. And Dawson Knox is their tight end 1 for the next couple of years at the least. So Luke Schoonmaker comes in, and that's what he would be, right? He probably already would be their tight end 2. He would probably already overtake Quentin Morris on the depth chart and just be their tight end 2 from his rookie year moving forward, which cool. Again, just kind of a well-rounded player who they could use in the, I guess, very few 2 tight end sets that they do use, which he would answer the call there, fit the bill. And another reason why I guess I bring him up is he's not a similar player to Dawson Knox. I don't want to say that, but he's similar draft profile, if that makes sense. You look back to Dawson Knox coming out of Ole Miss in 2019. What was the thing with him? Just like, good athlete, kind of just this well-rounded player, really good athlete who didn't do much at Ole Miss, right? Didn't have much production. What did I just say about Luke Schoonmaker? Like, good athlete, well-rounded player, didn't really do much at Michigan, right? That's kind of a profile. They've only drafted, I think they've only drafted 2 tight ends in the McBean era, Dawson Knox and then Tommy Sweeney, and the one who panned out fit this profile. So that's another reason why I bring him up. But again, I'm not overly fond of the idea of drafting a tight end in general, but wouldn't hate this pick.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm so torn on what to do with tight end because on the one hand, Morris, last week apparently you are just a giant Quentin Morris fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Quentin Morris. I don't know if he's necessarily tight end 2 type of guy, just because like what he offers is not dissimilar from what Dawson Knox brings, and I would like something else. I would like somebody who's just a more dedicated blocker type. But yeah, we can't always get what we want. I think that bringing in somebody to be tight end 2 would be nice, but also if you're just not going to use 12 personnel, it really doesn't matter,
right?
You know, so it's and we've obviously been teased sort of by ourselves about like, oh yeah, the Bills are told this totally signals that they're going to do more 12 personnel, and then they just don't.
Mhm.
It's just, it is what it is, and I'm tired of being convinced that that's going to be a thing. So I don't really care if they take a tight end or don't. I feel like they probably shouldn't, but if they do, I mean, take someone like Darnell Washington, who's just a total freak. The problem with that is that you're going to have to, yes, thank you, Roy Collins. I did see that, and I already had it written down, but that definitely solidified me bringing up Darnell Washington. So thanks, Roy. The problem with Darnell Washington is that he's going to get taken super early, and he should be, because he's a fascinating player with tons of athletic ability, great blocker. Like, there's a reason he's going to get taken early, but the Bills don't need to take Darnell Washington early. There's just no point to doing that. So, yeah. The good thing is that if the Bills do want a tight end, they can wait until day 3 to get one, because this is one of the areas where the draft is actually fairly deep. There's a lot of tight ends in this class. It's just a matter of, again, where does the board fall? And how high realistically do we really think tight end is on their board? Specifically, like tight end 2 is on their board as a draft pick. I just don't see it being that high.
Right. I agree 100%. Like Sam Laporta out of Iowa was a dude who I thought about doing, but just like, I don't know. Just like, the whole Iowa tight end thing. True, right? George Kittle, everyone's favorite Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson. Like, right? They've put out a few solid tight ends, 2 of them being better than the other one. But just like, given what Sam Laporta is, right? Like, good receiver talent, intriguing receiving ability, not a great blocker, like, or at least not, I guess, not the type of blocker that the Bills would need out of their tight end 2, I guess, is what I'm trying to say about that, which, like, I don't know. I don't think if the Bills take a tight end in this draft, I don't think he's going to be a dude who's like, oh, yeah, he's a receiver, just needs to refine as a blocker. Just like, no, like, they have that. Like, they have Dawson Knox, who's already a good receiver and has refined as a blocker. So bring in the more well-rounded dude who you're going to play on 15% of the snaps. Like, that's, I don't know. Like, I don't necessarily think they take the freak athlete tight end in this draft. I don't think that's what they need. I don't think that's how they address the need.
That's fair.
Okay. Are we moving on to offensive line here?
Yes, please.
Wait, RJ writes, I think Brandon Beane wants another top-notch tight end, and Dorsey doesn't know how to use the one we have now. Very true. You know what? You know what would be cooler than one good tight end that we don't use? 2 good tight ends that we don't use. I think that's fair. I think that's a great strategy. Let's see. Bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see how it pans out for him. All right. We're moving to the offensive line now. We're going to. I did divvy this up between offensive guard and offensive tackle, but we both pick players that have some versatility. I think yours more so than mine. But I'm focusing on Darnell Wright, who has kind of become a draft crush of Bills Twitter here in recent weeks. I have seen his name mocked to the Bills in several mocks, fan mocks in general. Darnell Wright has become a name that has become very popular. Of course, I'm talking about the Tennessee right tackle. According to PFF, he allowed just 8 pressures all of last season, 0 sacks. No sacks were allowed by Darnell Wright. 6 hurries and 2 hits. Graded better, again, take these with a grain of salt, if you will, maybe. They're PFF grades, but he graded out better as a pass blocker than he did as a run blocker, which, and again, the grades were 80.2, which is very good, to 65, which not great. But again, given how the rest of the Bills' offensive line is structured, that seems to be what they value. They seem to value better ability in pass protection than they do in run blocking, which makes sense, right? They are a pass-heavy team, pass-focused team. They like to give Josh Allen the ball. They like to say Josh Allen, make something happen. And we have 5 guys in front of you who can protect you for as long as they can, which Darnell Wright, I guess, fits that mold, fits that, I guess, scheme, if you will, or that idea. Played right tackle and left tackle in college, a little bit of guard. Given how the Buffalo Bills line is currently structured, they have a much more pressing need at right tackle than they do at left tackle specifically. And then they kind of did fill guard in their own way. They kind of addressed guard in their own way in the offseason, bringing in Connor McGovern. So they draft Darnell Wright. He is usurping Spencer Brown. He's coming in and he's probably taking that job in training camp. He is the right tackle moving forward. At least that's what they're picking him with the idea of. Again, it's nice that he has positional versatility, but he would be the right tackle here. And in Dave Brugler's draft guide, which came out today for The Athletic, sorry if I mispronounced that. I'm not good with names, as became clear today. But again, that article, that guide came out today. He said that some guards or some teams view him as a starting guard already, which, again, like I said, he's the right tackle for the Bills, but he has that versatility. Again, just about him as a player, good size for the position, 33 and 3/4 inch arms, which good, right? Fine to good. Arm length, really good power. Technique could use some work, just generally speaking, but that's what Aaron Kromer's for, right? That's why you have a good offensive line coach in Aaron Kromer, despite what, some people might argue with us now if we say that Aaron Kromer is a good offensive line coach. Given
they're still wrong, but they might.
Right, given how the last season panned out. But again, Aaron Kromer still has a very good track record. And again, give him a guy like Darnell Wright, dude with just power, competitiveness, and just needs a little refinement here and there. I think that Darnell Wright would be a plug and play right tackle who plays for the next at least 4 or 5 seasons with Buffalo, which, again, if you get a 5-year starter out of pick 27, if you get an immediate starter who you can pencil in your line for the next 5 years and Darnell Wright at pick 27, cool.
Yeah. I think Darnell Wright is going to be a really good player. He's kind of the only prospect from that Tennessee offense that I believe in. Because I'm not buying it on Jalen Hyatt. I'm not buying it on Hendon Hooker. You cannot convince me.
Hendon Hooker's going to be a first-round pick.
You cannot convince me that guys from this Mickey Mouse offense are going to be good in the NFL. Not happening. I'm not buying it. I didn't buy it when Art Briles was at Baylor. I'm not buying it with Josh Heupel at Tennessee. It's not happening. We're not getting into this. I love
Mickey Mouse.
So in terms of offensive line that I like, this is somebody that I actually had a chance to interview at the Senior Bowl, and that is Matt Bergeron from Syracuse. First of all, very nice guy, just super chill, very nice guy. Love that. His family came down from Canada to talk to just watch him.
He's Canadian?
Yeah.
Give me a second. He's moving.
His mom, like I could kind of overhear her a little bit. She was speaking not great English with a very French accent. So definitely French Canadian. I think he's somebody who's like athletic profile is kind of exactly what fits the Aaron Kromer archetype, right? Just like got the arm length, got the weight, the size, the athletic abilities. Like this is sort of what you want for an Aaron Kromer type of player. And I think that when I talked to him, I even asked him like, hey, what kind of blocking scheme are you more comfortable in? Gap versus zone. And he's like, I really like that outside zone. And I'm like, that's an Aaron Kromer thing. So I think he's somebody that's on the radar. And what's really interesting with him is I could totally see him. He's played left tackle at Syracuse. I could see him playing right tackle in the NFL. But really, like, this dude could be like a Pro Bowl type of guard. I think that he's really going to be a good player. Just like just one of those guys that you feel super confident in as just somebody who's going to be successful in the NFL wherever he ends up playing. Like, do you want to play him to play left tackle? Probably not. you would prefer to have him either inside at guard or even at right tackle, but I think this is just going to be a good player. And I think that, I don't know exactly where he's going to end up going. I've heard, end of the first round. I've heard second round, third round. There's a scout at the Senior Bowl who said he doesn't get out of the top 15, which I thought was very generous. But and I like Matt Bergeron, but top 15 is a lot for me. But I think that this is somebody that the Bills should definitely I just think he fits really well with what Aaron Kromer likes, what the Bills want to do on offense. He can play in space as a tackle. He can play as a zone guard. Just a good player. Draft good players, right? That's what we say.
I think that the Bills should. There are so many good players in this draft who I would like, and that happens every year, right? Bergeron certainly is one of them. I did not realize he was French Canadian. He's from Quebec.
Yeah, it is.
With a name like Bergeron, like obviously that makes sense. It makes sense that he's French Canadian. I just didn't think he was French Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think if he gets drafted by the Bills, he would invest in my poutine company?
I would make an offer. I mean, we could reach out to him. We can have him on the podcast.
I need to. Okay, I'm going to ask you to carry the show here momentarily.
Oh, good.
I need to
Thank
find.
You.
I need to find this tweet where.
Yes, you need to find a tweet where.
All right, here we go. 2016, and this is what I'm going to show my good friend Matt Bergeron. My new dream is to open a poutine bar in downtown Buffalo. You can get a number of different poutines from around the world in one location. That's my dream, and it's been my dream since 2016. And now I have my angel investor. Okay.
Let me ask you something. Will all of your poutines have cheese curds in them?
No, we can change it up.
Okay,
we can change up the ingredients of poutine.
I don't like the cheese curds.
It's an acquired taste.
It's not even the taste, it's the texture. That squeaky texture, I don't get it. I don't like it. Not a fan.
Okay. And here's another thing for the Buffalo people. I quote tweeted it 2 years later and wrote, "Imagine how disappointed / excited I was when I found out Allen Street Poutine Company exists." Allen Street Poutine Company was a restaurant. That was exactly what my idea was. It was just a poutine restaurant that had a bunch of different types of poutine. But it closed. So there is a market.
There's an opportunity.
That's the right. There's an opportunity. I don't want to say a market. I think the closure of Allen Street Poutine Company might disprove that. But there's an opportunity for Kyle and Matthew Bergeron to be business partners and open up the Bergeron Poutine. Buffalo Bergeron Poutine. There we go. He'd be your competitor. That is true. What if I pitch it to him? I'm like, Matthew, here is my unsolicited 50-page business proposal for us to be business partners and for you to be my angel investor in my poutine restaurant. And then he's just like, no, thank you. Or he doesn't respond. And then a year from now, he opens his own poutine restaurant. And
well, then you can sue him for like intellectual property theft, right?
Can I get?
Probably not. But we're gonna say you can anyway.
I was gonna say, if I create a Matthew Bergeron themed poutine restaurant, and then he actually does it, can I sue him for giving him the idea? For telling him you should do this?
Yeah, man.
All right, it's time for True or Rubbish.
True or Rubbish. Let's go.
Let's go. This is the segment where I give David a number of true or false statements, a number of statements, and he tells me whether or not they are true or rubbish. So, David, are you ready to commence?
Always ready, Kyle.
Jeremy Fowler just tweeted, Luke Schoonmaker has pre-draft visits with the Bills. There we go. Scoops. They're calling me Kyle Scoops here on the podcast. Or,
Nailed it. See, we
Kyle
went
Smart
long
Guy.
enough for one of the things we talked about to be relevant.
Finally that happened. All right, David. True or rubbish? You can foresee a realistic scenario in which the Bills trade up in the first round of this year's draft.
Boy, I sure hope not.
That is rubbish all after all. It was all rubbish.
Wow.
Here's the thing. There are players in this draft, right? Just like how in January of 2017, Sean McDermott said, there are
players on this roster.
There are players in this draft, and there are even good players in this draft. But man, unless you're taking a quarterback, I don't know how you're trading up for anyone in this draft. I just don't get it, man. Like, unless someone like really falls, like let's say Chris Sims is right and Will Anderson is the 5th edge taken in the draft. Like, yeah, sure, why not trade up for Will Anderson at some point if you didn't think you were gonna, like, if you really liked him and you didn't think you were gonna get him because you thought he was the best edge in the class. But I don't think that's, let's be honest. Even if Will Anderson did fall in a range where the Bills felt comfortable trading up, they're not taking Will Anderson. That's not a Bills player.
Nope.
So it's like, who are they trading up for? Are they trading up like 2 spots like they did last year with Kyer Elam? Maybe that's possible, but I don't know. It just seems like such a waste to use picks to trade up in a draft where there's not a ton of top end talent. And maybe that is the case to try and trade up. It's just like, let's just try and take whatever top end talent there is. But I think that's a weak argument. I would just feel better about the Bills staying at 27 or really trading back. I'd much rather trade back.
Yeah, I think most likely scenario is they stand pat, just let the draft come to them. But again, if they have, right, like if they get to like 21 and Smith and Jigba's still there before that run of wide receiver needy teams, right? If you get to the early 20s and, an Addison, a Smith and Jigba, or even a Zay Flowers is still there before you get the Chargers, before you get the Giants, before you get those types of teams, I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate, you throw a third or whatever. No, that's see, when I say it out loud.
Third's a lot.
Yeah.
Third's a lot. And if you're looking for, a linebacker, maybe. We don't know if they're going to take a linebacker. Maybe they are set on Bernard. Maybe not. If you need a linebacker, you need to be somewhere in those first couple rounds. Yeah, if you want a legitimate wide receiver who's going to contribute this year, has to be in those first couple rounds. You can probably wait until early day 3 to take an offensive line, but I don't know. And then you're looking at, if you want a potential defensive tackle for the future, if you're not going to re-sign Ed Oliver, if you want another edge to dip into that pool again, because your other picks just kind of suck there at this point. I don't know. Now, here's a scenario, right? Hey, you want to trade up a spot or 2 and just give up Boogie Basham for that? I'm all for that.
Yes,
but
I would do that. But would other teams take that?
Like a conditional 7th and Boogie Basham to move up 2 spots. I'm all for that. That's fine. That's nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree, though. Largely based off of what, what we've been saying. Yes, they're probably not going to trade up. Okay. I'm going to skip that one. The second one here that I wrote on the document, just because I don't feel like opening that can of worms. It's already 90 minutes deep. Okay.
That's fair.
So these next 2 questions are kind of They kind of coincide, and they could spark a conversation about positional value in the draft and roster building strategy as a whole. Okay. As I said earlier, there are a number of good tight ends in this draft, some of which are valued right around where the Bills are slated to pick at 27. So true or rubbish, the Bills can take a tight end at 27 and you would be okay with it.
Absolute rubbish.
That is rubbish all after all. It was all rubbish.
If you want to use your first round pick on a position where you already don't use the guy that you're paying a bunch of money to, screw off. Like, there's no nice way of putting that. Get out of here. You are not. No, I'm not going to entertain that. It's ridiculous. Thank you, and the chat absolutely agrees with me, as they should. Thank you very much.
Okay, but do we agree that there will likely be a few tight ends available at 27 who that's roughly where their value is in terms of the draft?
Sure.
Okay, next
And
question.
if that's the case, hey, maybe a team wants to trade up for a Michael Mayer.
Next question.
I
think it's been largely stated at this point and largely agreed upon that the linebackers this year, especially middle linebackers, maybe not great, right? Like maybe there won't be a player available when the Bills pick a 27 who matches up in terms of value, in terms of draft capital. So true or rubbish? The Bills can take a linebacker at 27, and you would be okay with it.
I'm going to use the strictest definition of okay and say true.
This was true all after all. Can't believe it. It was true.
I'm not going to say I'll like it. I'm not going to say this is a great pick, because odds are it's probably like Jack Campbell, right? Who's fine. I think he's a perfectly fine player.
Right. Or Simpson, yeah.
Right. Like either of those two would be who their targets are. But I'm not super ecstatic about it. I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh yeah, these are the guys who, are going to totally replace what Tremaine Edmonds does, right? Because you can't really have a one-to-one replacement of what Tremaine Edmonds does. True rubbish. Honestly, yeah, fair, Roy Collins. True rubbish. It's like, we would like to be able to take a legitimate Mike linebacker at 27. If one decides to enter the draft, I sure would like to see it. Like, it is what it is. And the other thing is, let's be honest, I mean, that class where Tremaine Edmonds came out in, which was 2018, that was a great linebacker class.
Roquan, Van Der Esch.
Like, the only ones that have really panned out were Roquan and Edmonds. Van Der Esch has had injuries and is like good, but hasn't been the same player that he was since his rookie year. You had Rashaan Evans, who I think is on his third team. Maybe is he still with the Falcons?
I think so. 2018 was Fred Warner, though, correct?
Fred Warner, but that was a third round pick, right?
Right.
And then you had Darius Leonard in the second.
True. Yeah.
Be a second round pick. And so you're looking, when you talk about like, oh, you can't take X position. Usually it's running back, right? You can't take running back in the first round. Look at the success of off-ball linebackers in the first round. You probably would have a better argument saying don't take off-ball linebackers in the first round before saying don't take running back in the first round. I don't know, man. I don't. I think that if they took Jack Campbell or Trenton Simpson at 27, I would be okay with it, but I would not be excited about it.
It's interesting. It's interesting how, we pound the table for best player available, except when it's like, I'm just in general, as a fan base, as a football fandom, we all want best player available, except when it's like, I don't want a tight end too. And they need a linebacker. It's just funny. Okay. True or rubbish? This is the part where we talk about Star Wars, which is what I think we prefer to do anyway. True or rubbish? Lucasfilm will make all 3 of the movies they announced last weekend.
I'm gonna go against the grain and I'm gonna say true.
This was true all after all. Can't
You're
believe
crazy.
it. It was true.
They don't have a great track record.
So I think the one that's most likely to be made is the Dave Filoni Mandoverse. Just saying that irritates me. Yeah. Right. Like that's the one that's probably most likely because he's already a part of Lucasfilm. They've kind of already developed this universe to tie everything together. You know, it is what it is. It'll probably get made. The next likely one is probably the new Jedi Order movie with Daisy Ridley returning as Rey, and largely because they've already announced that Daisy Ridley is returning as Rey. It would be pretty awful to just be like, no, we're just going to cancel that one.
Actually, no. LOL.
It would just be ridiculous. But the one that I'm most excited about, but also the one that I feel like is least likely to happen is the Dawn of the Jedi by, what's his name? I keep forgetting.
James Mangold.
James Mangold, yeah. Who, by the way, is the one doing the newest Indiana Jones movie, and which is another Lucasfilm product. So I think it says something. I think it says something about Mangold and the work that he's done on Indiana Jones, where they're kind of looking there and being like, "Oh, maybe we should keep this guy around."
He's a good filmmaker.
And I do like that this Dawn of the Jedi movie concept was described as a biblical epic, like a 10 Commandments of the Force. I'm like, heck yeah, give me that. I'm all about that. The thing with that, though, in the previous timeline, right, the Legends timeline, there was a comic series that was made fairly late, like in the 2010s, like in like mid 2010s, like right before Disney took over, called The Dawn of the Jedi. And there was a book that went with it as well called Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void, blah, blah, blah. It's a very odd story. It goes off the rails, much like this podcast, very, very quickly. It gets very weird. And I think when you get into that sort of philosophical origins, type of story, it can get and it either gets weird or it gets pretentious or it gets both, right? And I think that something like that still needs to be really grounded. And I think that someone like James Mangold, who has done something like Logan, right? I don't know if you ever saw Logan.
Logan's great, yeah.
Logan is great. I was surprised by how much I did enjoy that. I think that's something like that. Not necessarily like, that specific type of story, obviously, but just something that's like very grounded and rooted in just sort of like things that are very understandable, right?
Right.
I think that's what you're looking for. So I am most excited about Dawn of the Jedi, but also thinking like, we'll see where that ends up. I think the other two are more likely, but I think all are fairly likely because they have officially announced these rather than just sort of leaked them to the media or press and
the Hollywood Reporter.
Right. It's not like, hey, let's leak this and see what the reaction is. Like, oh, no one wants this? Cool. We'll turn it into a TV series instead.
No, you're right. The Dawn of the Jedi movie sounds like by far the coolest one, right? Like by far, that's the coolest concept. With James Mangold, awesome. Like you said, though, least confident that gets made. And then the Rey one, cool.
I'm interested in seeing that character with a director who knows what they're doing, right? So like, if it's not going to be Rian Johnson, then it should be someone who's not J.J. Abrams. So.
Right, and Stephen Knight's writing it, so he's a good screenwriter or a good writer in general. And then also, yeah, Dave Filoni. I saw a tweet this last week, and it was like, I think Star Wars should be more than Dave Filoni hitting his action figures together. And I was like, yes, that's a great way to put it.
You already know Dave Filoni has a mental checklist of all the different cameos he can shove into
Oh
2.5
my God.
hours.
Look, this last week's, I have not loved this season of Mando, right? And I was attributing it to like, okay, it's just kind of such a tonal shift from Andor, and I had gotten so used to Andor, and I really loved Andor. So like, just being thrust back into this version of the world, I'm just not really ready for it. So like, it's a me issue. And then this last episode happened, and I was like, oh my God, like this is a children's show. Like there's an iRobot chase scene going on. Like this is not good. Like, and just not even with the celebrity cameos.
I was gonna say, are you not a Jack Black Lizzo shipper?
Like not even that. And just like at the end of like, this is my favorite thing about Dave Filoni, right? And like Ahsoka's existence kind of is alluding to this, right? Or just like that's kind of part of it, but just like we're really getting off the rails, but just like he just like likes his ideas, and he just kind of builds on them and just goes. Just like with Grogu, it's like he's a Jedi and also he's a Mandalorian, and now at the end of this episode he gets knighted, and it's just like, what else are you gonna? He does backflips, and just like it's just like Dave Filoni just being a child, being like, wouldn't it be cool if this little baby Yoda was also a Mandalorian and also a knight, and also like, it's just so stupid.
It's sort of like, so when Rebels started, right? I was like, okay, this is a halfway decent like kid show. And then season 2 got going, and then they brought back Ahsoka, and I was like, whatever, I don't care about this. And then they kill Ahsoka, only to bring her back in the 4th season, which then turned into this whole thing about the Force and the Jedi. And it's like, I'm sorry, wasn't this show called Rebels? Like, why are we doing this whole dive into philosophy and the Force and all this stuff? And it's just like, this is kind of why I'm like low-key excited about the Ahsoka show, because this is clearly just what Filoni has wanted to do for like 10 years now.
Right, yeah.
Right? It's just like, you finally get to do the thing you've always wanted to do. So now you get to do that instead of ruining everyone else's show. So
RJ writes, yeah, that episode would have been fine if it was a 22 episode season like the animated stuff. But when you have less than 13 episodes a season, you can't waste time.
You have 8. You have 8 seasons.
You have 8, and you certainly can't.
Episode, sorry.
You certainly cannot waste that precious time when after you have 2 episodes left and you've barely really introduced what this season is about, right? Like, they're gonna take back Mandalore. That's what we know. You have 2 episodes to do that now. Like, they took away my Taika Waititi movie. That's all I know, and I'm devastated.
We don't know that yet.
They're probably not going to make my Taika Waititi movie.
Kyle, are you a Thor: Love and Thunder fan?
I'm an apologist. I've wrote a whole article about this just because I'm a fucking nerd, and I wrote a whole article about it just because I saw like this reaction after it was announced it was rumored a couple of weeks ago that Taika Waititi was starring in his own Star Wars movie, and like people were like, he made the worst comic book movie of all time, blah 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 blah. And it's like, well, one, it's not that bad. It's his worst movie. It's not his worst movie. There's one worse. I've seen every Taika Waititi movie, and most of them are very, very good. Most of them are incredible. He has 2 that aren't. He's made like 7 movies. 2 of them aren't great. The other 5 are, and it's just like there's such recency bias and stupidity. But he's not gonna make his movie now. Are we good here? Are we done?
I'm set.
Thank you all for watching, especially if you stuck around for Star Wars talk. Make sure to subscribe to the Cover One YouTube channel. It's somewhere down there. Make sure to follow Cover One on all social media platforms at some variation of @Cover One. Make sure to subscribe to the iTunes feed of this show and all of the Cover One shows. We have Air Raid Hour, we have Disguise Coverage, we have Cover One Buffalo, we have Going Deep, we have If the Walls Could Talk, we have Under Review. I'm sure I'm missing some podcasts as well. If I am, my bad. I listen to them all, obviously. I'm just forgetting the names. So yeah, make sure to subscribe to all of those iTunes feeds. Make sure to check out Cover One Premium. That is Cover One Pass. That is the premium subscription service, if you will. Misspoke there. But again, yes, become an insider, $57 a year, and you get all of this stuff that you can see on the screen here right now. If you're not looking at the screen and listening as a podcast, because you subscribed on iTunes, of course. Again, you get exclusive members-only content, in-depth analysis, breakdowns, video, written. You get exclusive written content. You get access to the Cover One Premium Slack. Bunch of great stuff. Make sure to follow Dave or check out Underdog Fantasy and BetUS. Make sure to follow David on Twitter at.
You can follow me at GFAUXY or at DFoxy. Kyle, where can the people find you on the Elon Musk Bird app?
You can find me there, yucky, at Kyle Silagyi. It's written there if you can't spell Silagyi, which I can't most of the time. Thank you guys for watching, and we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.